Last year, on a per game average, you're looking at 3 solo tackles, 2 assists, and about a sack a game last year. They'd come back and it'd be on the floor, and he'd be like, "Okay, well, the wind got that."
Welcome back, everyone. This is episode 11 of Player Normal Activity. Thank you for joining me once again. I'm your host, Kraig. Today, we have a guest that some of you may not know, but for those of you in the IDP community, you're certainly going to know him. We have Johny The Greek with me. He is a writer for the IDP guys, and he is the creator of The Monster, which, again, if you're familiar with IDP, I'm sure you've seen it. It goes over anyone and everyone regarding IDP news from the week prior during the season. He is also the one that goes over the cornerback corner for the IDP guys. It goes over cornerback specific plays each week and prior results for those of you that like to get into those deep IDP leagues that I do, where you're required to play cornerbacks. And he's also a guest on a number of IDP pods, like the IDP show, Getting Defensive, and the Big Nickel. We have Johny The Greek with us today. John, how you doing? Thanks for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I'm doing good. Really looking forward to this. I love the idea of this show because we need more stuff like this. You'd be surprised how many people are into stuff like this. Like when I saw you were doing this, I immediately hit you up. I was like, this is great. Please let me come on. I want to talk about this stuff. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for the kind words, too. Yeah, it's hard to find something unique, even semi-unique out there in the fantasy football world, but it's two interests of mine. And there's, like you said, enough people that are interested in both parts of this that it seems to be well received, which is great and gives me something other than fantasy football to talk about with the regular people. But that said, of course, we're going to be going into player first here, and you picked a player near and dear to both of our hearts as Cowboy fans. You chose Micah Parsons, which also thank you for choosing an IDP player. It's the first IDP player we've had on the show, so great to see that. But tell us what you like about Micah Parsons and where you see him going here.
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, you got the stats up there, so I know you're going to get into that. But I was looking at this, and last year, on a per game average, you're looking at 3 solo tackles, 2 assists, and about a sack a game last year. In most leagues scoring, that's easily double digits. That's pushing 20 points a game. And he had games that would win you your week last year. Just unreal games. 2, 3 sack games. This guy came out of nowhere. And the deal with him is, he's got dual eligibility in Sleeper, probably some other sites too. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens elsewhere, Fantrax, Yahoo, stuff like that. He's just an X factor, right? Like that, adaptability, being able to play him in multiple different places, having those week winning games, the talent, the draft capital, like the sky is the limit for this guy. I haven't seen anything bad. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, he was a high recruit out of Penn State. He played those 2 years and he sat out 2020 due to COVID. But, I mean, he just had a standout college career even for a linebacker. And then you start to look at, as far as the NFL, what he was able to do. I was surprised when he fell in the draft, honestly, to the Cowboys. Pleasantly surprised, of course, how it ended up. But I kind of thought he would go higher than he did. Number 12 overall pick. And what can you say about him? First team All-Pro, Pro Bowl, Defensive Rookie of the Year. And he was just a gift for what he was able to do. And he had more sacks and tackles for a loss in his rookie year in the NFL than he did combined in those 2 years at college. So it was great to see him do something different and just prove he's that multifaceted player. But, to your point about those sacks and tackles for a loss, going into this year and beyond, we're looking at a very different Cowboys team with the linebackers and the defensive line. So do you think they're going to use him more as a true linebacker, or they're still going to have it relatively evenly split? It was 56% in the box, 40% on the defensive line. I think their defensive line depth is better now than their linebacker depth, but how do you see that shaking out here?
Yeah, that's the question, right? And I think it's a win-win. I really do. I think, even if he does have more linebacker snaps, that's, more consistency and less of those huge games and then maybe smaller games in between. So I think it's a win-win any way you split it. So looking at their defensive line kind of depth right now, I mean, D-Law's there and that's automatic. But other than that, Dante Fowler, he's traditionally been terrible. Dorrance Armstrong instead of Randy Gregory. So, I mean, there's still a role for him there, I think, especially with what he showed last year. And if you just think about what's valuable in the NFL on defense, pass rush is the key, right? And he showed he's excellent at that. So I think he'll still definitely get some pass rush snaps. What I'm kind of hoping for is more of a split where we get like that floor of tackles each week. and then enough pass rush that we still get like 10 sacks or something. That'd be beautiful right there.
Yeah, he had great player grades overall there on PFF, which, isn't the be all end all, but as far as kind of player grades, it's more or less what we have to go off of, and they do great work over there. I found it interesting when I saw like how low just comparatively like his run defense was, which, as a linebacker, you're kind of probably looking for a little bit more of that. But with the pass rush, 93 rating, 89 overall is like almost 70% in coverage. The sky is the limit for him. I'm really happy to have him there. And I don't know that there's a lot of room for improvement. I think you're going to see a balancing out of it. I don't mean improvement as a player. I mean, for fantasy football, how we're talking here, it's going to be hard to be consistently better than he was. I think he was in top 5 in points and then points per game as a rookie linebacker, depending on your scoring. But throughout most of them, he was right up there with the top guys that you would want. That's probably the zone that you're most hopeful for that he can stay in. There isn't a whole lot of advancement unless you're thinking he's going to be TJ Watt somehow, just maintaining those crazy high sack and tackle for a loss totals.
Yeah, definitely, man. And I think just what's great about him is just you get so much with one player, especially if you're in those leagues where he's got that dual eligibility. Like, it's one guy that can do so many things. You're guaranteed a good safe floor each game. And then you got those weeks he's just going to go nuts. And if you look at just kind of the players around him, like Keanu Neal's gone, Jalen Smith is gone. Van Der Esch has cooled off since that season a couple of years back where he was pretty good. Jarrell Cox is an unknown still. So it's like, I feel like that floor is safe for tackles. And then, anything else we're getting after that is just icing on the cake. Yeah, it's a great pick. The only thing that makes him go down in my mind a little bit is just the price I've seen. I don't know what you're seeing in best balls and startups right now, but good God, man, you got to sell your firstborn kid to get him.
He's going right up there with TJ Watt, and sometimes even going higher, especially if it's dynasty because of just that age factor. But it's usually those two players, big name, young guy. It's what people love in dynasty and even redraft because he's proven it, what he could do. Yeah, it's going to be interesting just with the way that linebacker group has changed, to your point. It's just a lot of unknowns besides really Van Der Esch. The other guys either are rookies, street free agent, or had less than, I think Gifford and Cox had less than 20 snaps on defense, both of them last year. So it's him, Van Der Esch, and maybe they'll sign a veteran or something. I don't know, but there isn't a whole lot of depth there, which as far as those linebackers that get to be on the field at 90% of the snaps or something, there aren't a whole lot of them anymore. And he has a chance to be one of them, which is what you're looking for, really.
Yeah, definitely. And that's actually one area I think we could see a little improvement because he topped out at like 86, 90% of snaps last year. He could play every snap, 100%. He could do that. Definitely. I remember them saying stuff like the things you hear about all rookies, right? They're used to a 12, 13 game season, not a 16, 17 game season. Now that he's got an NFL season under his belt, we'll see more snaps, I hope, this year.
Well, I certainly like him, and like you said, his value is. We'll have to see if it's at his peak, but it almost feels like it's at his peak, and maybe it'll plateau and stay here over the course of his career. I have a hard time seeing it going up. Are you comfortable taking him as your number one guy? Depending on where in the draft the IDPs start to go, are you comfortable taking him there then?
Full disclosure, if I'm going linebacker first, I'm probably going Roquan just because I've always been a rely on tackles guy because they're more consistent week to week, and consistency is king for me. And it's just like impossible to get him right now. But would I be comfortable? Oh, yeah, absolutely. If he was there, I would be super duper comfortable taking him as my over one LB. Yeah.
Again, we're both Cowboys fans, so you're not going to get a whole lot of negative out of us about Micah Parsons after that first year that he had. But thanks for bringing him up and wanting to talk about him here on the show. We're going to be moving from the football field to the 40 in here. But before we do that, again, thank you everyone who is listening, watching during the premiere, after the fact, whatever have you. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and then tune in, go back to see what the other shows are. These are going to be released every Friday as long as I can get them pumped out here. That'd be 12 Eastern. And also make sure you go on Twitter. You can find Johny at OrangeMan3142 if you like going over on the Twitter and getting information that way, but also over at IDP guys. It's where we find all his content. Next topic, the paranormal. This is going to be a good one. So you have some information about a haunting investigation that had been done years ago, a haunted stonemason's lodge investigation. Is that right?
Yes, sir, it is. So how this happened is in my home league, there's this guy, Chris, God, I think it's Mancuso. I used to work with him, Chris M, and he's got his own paranormal investigation group, but it's like a very unofficial thing. They like just bought some equipment and they do stuff, but they knew this guy, Orlando Ferrante, who's legit. Like this guy is supposedly a medium and had done famous investigations. He's friends with the Warrens. I was just telling Kraig before we kicked this off, there's a picture of him with Lorraine Warren having dinner at a nice Italian restaurant in 2011 on his Facebook page. And Chris was telling me this guy is going to do a presentation on this haunted stonemasons lodge. It's the stonemasons lodge, my buddy Chris. That's their lodge. He's a stonemason. And he's like, yeah, we always thought it was haunted. So he called Orlando. He came, he investigated, he presented his evidence, and it looks like it is haunted. So he was going to do a presentation on the evidence. So it was like this thing. It was like $5 to get in, and there were like 20, 30 people there. And he's like, come check it out. It was on Halloween night, like in 2013 or something, somewhere around there. And I was like, all right, I'll come. It sounds interesting. And I was total skeptic. This doesn't exist. It's not a thing. This is dumb, but I'll go. It'll be entertaining. I walked in a skeptic. I walked out a complete believer 2 hours later. And I have no doubts that all this exists now. Yeah, this guy swayed me 100% just between the evidence he presented, his demeanor. Like you could tell when someone's full of crap. Like he was not. He's been on one of those shows on like A&E, like A Haunting or whatever. You know what I'm talking about? Those shows that they have. Yeah, he did one of those. So one of those shows actually wanted to buy footage off him and offered him like 45 grand for it, but he didn't want to give it up because he thought he could get more, because they did this investigation where they had thermal cameras and they caught something crawling out of a baby's crib that was not human and not an animal. And he showed us that footage, and that scared the living crap out of me. And then, and then he had all kinds of EVPs. I pulled this off so I went back and looked at all this stuff because it's on his Facebook page from the investigation. One of the EVPs was a voice saying, leave, like in a super deep voice. I remember that. I remember it saying some other things. There were things that these voices said that only old stonemasons would have known. And that's the part that really sold me. Like, he's got a random recording of some voice saying something, and the other stonemasons are like, oh, yeah, that's like one of our mottos from like the 1700s or something. And I'm like, what? Like,
wow.
This dude's not a stonemason. He's some guy from Florida. He has no idea, and that it's not something you can look up on the internet either. So, all of it sold me, and I walked out of there a total believer. And since then, whenever they do, it's like a Halloween tradition now, is to have a local paranormal investigation group come in and discuss or present about their most recent investigation. I try and go every Halloween now, and it's really good. So that's how I got into it. How did you get into all this? I'm just as interested in that.
It really, I've never had any real experience, and I always forget what I've slightly mentioned on here or not prior, but growing up in my parents' house, they still live there. They were the second owners of the house. I think the lady still may be alive that had, originally bought it and all that. You hear footsteps when you're in the basement at night, just people walking around. And it's like, well, of course it could be someone walking around. Well, when you're home alone and, it's 10 o'clock at night because people are out or something, and you're alone, we only had a cat. Cat sleeps in the basement, sitting there with you. You can just hear someone just walking back and forth, and it's not constant, but walking around. But that's literally the only thing that ever happened in the house. And it's like, well, it's not doing anything to us. Whatever, let it be. That was how my brother and I felt. And my parents said, oh, you're full of it and everything. And years later, once we're older and moved out of the house, my dad admitted pretty quickly, like, oh yeah, he'd heard that before, but he didn't want to say anything because we're kids, or whatever. And my mom's just of the opinion of, well, it doesn't do anything, don't talk about it too much, let it be. It's not a great story or anything, but that's all that I've had my experience. But unsolved mysteries as a kid, there were stories in a boy's life about Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster, which as a kid reading that stuff was just fascinating. So that's really what got me into it. And then, the explosion of podcasts and these TV shows just really let you dive into it. So
yeah, it really does, man.
That's my time.
Yeah, and I wish I could say I had something personally happen. I haven't. The evidence I saw presented was really compelling stuff, and just some of the stories he had too about some of the things he's seen throughout these investigations. Cameraman's, like a cameraman get tossed like a rag doll by nothing, You know what I mean? By like
Yeah.
the air and, scratches on people with like bloody scratches after they leave a house, and no one touched anyone. They're just in there filming. They're just in there with microphones and IR cameras and stuff, and they're leaving all bloody. And it's just wild stuff. And this guy was just, you could tell that he wasn't screwing around, right? He was not making a fortune doing this. He was doing it
Yeah.
because he wanted to spread the word. And part of his deal is he can help, he wants to help resolve these things if you're stuck in a house with this going on. Because he himself, he said he's a medium. I believe the guy, so he's got experience with trying to resolve these issues if there's something in your house. And that's it. That he maybe got 50, $60 out of the whole thing. There's no reason for him to like lie to a room full of people. Plus, he had physical evidence. Like,
Yeah.
so,
So your friend that is a stonemason from that lodge, have they had other people come in there, or have they had any other? Do they do investigation of it themselves, really beyond after the investigation by that guy?
they actually got out of that lodge. It became too much for them because they were having stuff happen to them all the time too. So
Oh
they
wow.
just, eventually they got freaked out and they got out of there. But what happened is the side effect of that is a bunch of them started their own like paranormal investigation group. And that's how the tradition continues, because Orlando Ferrante moved back to Florida. He hasn't been around in years, but these guys now just kind of do their own thing. And they do the presentations every Halloween now. So I still go to those. And the last one I went to, it was I can't even remember where they investigated, somewhere in Connecticut. And the guy was telling stories about they'd leave like a box of, someone smoked, so they left a pack of cigarettes just sitting on a window ledge, and they'd come back and it'd be on the floor, and he'd be like, okay, well the wind got that. They'd put it back up there, it'd come back, it'd be on the floor again every time for like weeks and stuff like that. And they all, when you hear them all talk about it, like the preponderance of evidence at some point is enough that you're like, okay, something is going on here. So,
That's great. Do you know how long they'd had that building or anything like that in general? Like how long it had been owned by the stonemasons and people had been there?
oh, a long time, a long time. It was since like the Revolutionary War days, I believe. Yeah, a long time. Yeah,
Wow. Yeah, and I
yeah.
mean, even if different people believe in different stuff. If you don't think it was a human spirit or something, definitely the idea of just good and bad energy. That there's clearly something when people are in an area like that for that long, doing something. Good things, bad things happen. Yeah, I believe in definitely the whole energy thing concept. That's crazy though.
Yeah, yeah, and they saw a lot of the movie stuff or the video stuff was like energy orbs that you see on those TV shows a lot, right? Like they had a lot of the same
Yep.
stuff, like the little floaties and the energy balls, and who knows what those are. But the one that I just remember like gave me goosebumps and totally freaked me out was it was just an IR camera just focused on not one, they had a ton, and they wired up this whole house that they were investigating. And yeah, it was like a crib and something crawled out of the crib. It was not a cat, it was not a dog, it was not like a rat, it was not human. It was, I don't know what the hell it was, but it was really freaking scary, man. It was not something of this earth, that's for damn sure. And he's telling stories about how like A&E or TNT is offering him money for that clip, just that clip. And he's telling us the story before he shows it, and I'm like, what can be so special about this? And he shows it, and I'm like, okay, I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, they want that clip. Yeah.
That's beyond just coincidental, kind of creepy. Sort of that's downright scary. Yeah. Anytime like little kids are involved and then creatures or spirits from beyond or something, that's the really scary stuff to me.
So when Orlando presented, he presented about the stonemason lodge itself, which had some good EVP stuff, some orbs, stuff like that. But he wrapped up with that presentation that showed that video with like the crib. But that was the same house where the person got thrown, the cameraman got thrown, and people got scratched and bloodied and stuff. And he didn't have any like proof, but he thought it was like a demonic possession in that house, is what he came to believe. And the resolution was the people just moved out. Like they just couldn't take it and they were out of there. Pretty wild stuff.
Did your friend or any of the people that he was there with ever have experiences like that too, with people getting attacked or hurt or anything that he mentioned to you?
So not at the Mason's Lodge, no. Those are more he called them like nuisance spirits. Like they would just do like trickster things or little funny things, nothing like evil. But these guys, have since formed their own little group and gone and investigated some, probably worse places. The last one I went to was I mean, stupid Corona screwed everything up, so I haven't been to one in a minute. But yeah, they've definitely had some stories of like temperature changes in the middle of summer and stuff like that.
Yep.
Stuff like that. But yeah, no attacks on their part. But I don't think they were going anywhere like super crazy. Like this Orlando guy would go to like the worst places. Like he had no problem with that, which no thank you.
I messed around with the idea that with the friends in high school going like, oh, this road is supposed to be haunted or whatever, around your hometown, or this house that's been abandoned for years, something bad happened. Most counties anyway, have a couple places like that, and we'd go screw around and do whatever, and nothing. I can't say anything ever happened to any of that. But as I've gotten older and had kids and stuff like that, the desire to try to mess with this stuff in any sort of form has just completely gone away from me. I don't have any interest in messing with that stuff anymore.
I hear you, man. It's not worth it if something goes south these days, right? You should ask Tipster Gary to come on because he had a good story. We were talking about this before the last getting defensive because I mentioned I was coming on here, and he had a good story about I think it was like an asylum he went to,
Yep,
and
he's going to be on. Yep.
nice. Okay, you got him. Good.
Yeah, he had interest once he started seeing a couple of these, and we'll see if he brings a defensive player, decides to go dirty on me. But we're getting him scheduled here in a couple weeks.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, no, this is a great idea, and I wish I had more for you. But I do plan on going this Halloween now that the Corona. I mean, it's still bad, but no one cares. So I'll probably just go, and I'll let you know what they come up with.
Yeah, if you have any sort of experience or anything happen, certainly let me know. We can always bring you back on. And I want to thank you again for coming on and speaking to me today about Micah Parsons and that stonemason lodge that was haunted that your friend had. And why don't you tell everyone again where to find you and your stuff?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, man. So yep, idpguys.org. That's where I do a lot of in-season stuff, and then in the off season, just bouncing around, doing stuff like this, which is awesome. And then Gary's show a lot, getting defensive, Big Nickel, IDP show, stuff like that. Wherever the wind takes me, and I'm doing a Cats of Fantasy Twitter article series this year because I've lost my mind. It's going to be about people that have cats and playing fantasy leagues.
Oh, well, that sounds interesting. Again, a different sort of angle there. And I'm sure that'll be a big read for the people that love to have the cat versus dog fight. So.
Yeah, but dude, we need more stuff like this. This is why I loved that you did this, right? Because it's always the same stuff all the time. We got to spice it up a little bit, and this is a beautiful take on that. This is perfect.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Like I said, if you ever have something else, let me know. I'd love to have you on again. And for all of you watching, thanks again to you all for paying attention to my show here. And make sure you go check out John and his stuff. And whether you're interested in Micah Parsons or the Mothman, remember that we're going to have you covered here on Player Normal Activity. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for watching. If you'd like more great fantasy football content like this, please click the link down below here.